Good evening. I'd like to open the, I guess we're calling it the regular meeting of the June 27th, 24, which is the July meeting of the Webster Groves Board of Adjustment. I'd like to call this to order. Tom, would you please please call the roll?
John Burse.
Here.
Randy Sprague.
Here.
Debbie Sahlberg.
Here.
Mel Wilson. Mel is on Zoom. Mel is here. Good. And I'm Tom Walsh, present.
In addition to the board members, we also have Mara Perry, the Director of Planning and Development, and Peter Buntrager, the acting city attorney. We have two petitions tonight, and we do have 5 members, including Mel, who is online. So we'll take them in the order that they were advertised. The city staff will present the testimony regarding the facts of the request. Then the applicant will have the opportunity to present their request to the board and address questions. We'll ask for anyone who's in the audience or who's online who's in favor, and then anyone who's in opposition to speak. Then the board will close the public session and we'll move to board discussion and decision, and we'll do this separately for each of the 2 petitions. The proceedings are recorded, so we ask you to speak clearly and one at a time. You will need to come to the podium to speak as well. We will vote on your applications tonight for a decision. Approval will take 4 out of the 5 board members' approval, and please try not to be redundant or repetitive in your comments. Tom, would you please read the powers relative to the variances?
When by reason of exceptional narrowness, shallowness, or shape of a specific piece of property as of September 20th, 1956, or by reason of exceptional topographical conditions or other extraordinary or exceptional situation or condition of a specific piece of property, which condition is not generally prevalent in the neighborhood, the strict application of the area regulations of this zoning code would result in peculiar and exceptional practical difficulties to or exceptional and undue hardship upon the owner of such property. The board is hereby empowered to authorize, upon an appeal related to such property, a variation from such strict application so as to relieve such difficulties or hardships.
Thank you. Would you please read docket 2418 into the record?
Yeah, docket 2418 is a petition submitted by Michael Blaze Architects on behalf of Walter Widmer for an application for variance from section 53.063K.2, 53.203A1, and 53.203A3 of the zoning code of the city of Webster Groves. The applicant is requesting a side yard variance of 4.3 feet from the required 13-foot east side yard setback in order to build a new single-family dwelling 8.7 feet from the east side property line. The second request for a variance of 0.7 feet from the maximum width of 23.67 feet in order to build a new single-family dwelling with a front entry garage that is 24.38 feet wide. A third request for a variance of 20 feet from the maximum projection of 6 feet in order to build a new single-family dwelling with a front entry garage that sits 26 feet in front of the remainder of the front elevation of the house. A fourth request is to not be required to have an architecturally integrated covered front porch extended along the remainder of the front elevation of the new single-family dwelling with a front entry garage. The property is located at 524 Bacon Avenue within the A3 10,000 square foot residence district.
Thank you. Mr. Bruntrager?
For, put on testimony, I would ask that exhibits 1 through 9, on the PowerPoint here, be, made part of the record, for purposes of document 2418.
Thank you.
We would call Mara Perry to testify.
Would you please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
Could you please state your name for the record?
Yes, Mara Perry.
Are you employed by the city of Webster Groves?
Yes, I am.
In what capacity?
Director of Planning and Development
What are your duties in that position?
to execute and administer zoning regulations.
Through your work with the city, are you familiar with 524 Bacon Avenue?
Yes, I am.
Is this within city limits?
Yes, it is.
In which zoning district is it located?
It's in the A3 10,000 square foot residence district.
What is the applicant's request in docket number 2418?
So the applicant has 4 requests, all related to the construction of a new single-family dwelling. Due to the fact that they were all read into the record just a moment ago, rather than waste time reading through each of them specifically, I'm going to very quickly summarize. It's a side yard variance of 4.3 feet from the required 13-foot east side yard. It's a variance of 0.7 feet from the maximum width of 23.67 feet for the front entry garage elevation. Variance of 20 feet from the maximum projection of 6 feet for the garage in front of the remainder of the house, and not to have an architecturally integrated covered front porch.
Which code sections apply to this request?
So there's 4 different code sections. However, one of the sections kind of overlaps for that 4th section. So the first section is related to preservation of existing grade. So when the allowed finished floor elevation of a new residential structure exceeds the finished floor of an adjacent residential structure by more than 3 feet, the side yard setback of the new structure shall be increased by 1 foot for every 6 inches the new structure's finished floor sits above the adjacent lower structure. This increased side yard setback shall only apply to the side adjacent to the lower structure. I know it's a very complicated section. I'll have slides to describe all this. The other code sections are related to attached garage regulations. Front entry garages are permitted if 40% or more of the single-family dwellings on both sides of the street on the same block have front entry garages. When the vehicle doors face a street, the following standards must be met. So item number 1, for single-family dwellings with front elevation widths of 44 feet or greater, the garage width shall be limited to a maximum of 42% of the front elevation or 22 feet, whichever is greater. In the last section, which applies to the last 2 variances, the garage portion of the front elevation may project a maximum of 6 feet beyond the remainder of the front elevation, provided that if the garage projects 4 or more feet beyond the remaining front elevation, that an architecturally integrated covered porch shall extend along the remainder of the front elevation.
Mara, I have a question. So
Yes.
the increased side yard setback when you have a house that is built up higher, that's a fairly recent change. The other changes are 15, 20 years old,
Yeah.
right?
Correct. That first one is a recent change due to some concerns with houses sitting so far out of the ground above their neighbors that the neighboring house looking out their living room windows was looking at foundation of the new house. So this provides and moves the house over farther away from the setback to give a little bit more buffer from the houses on either side.
I've got a question. On the last of the request, are they asking for a variance from that? Because the 4th request,
I'll describe it when I show the elevations and why it doesn't meet the technical definition or how we have interpreted the code in the past.
okay.
Can you describe the existing conditions of the property?
Yes. This is currently a vacant lot. It was previously owned by adjacent property owners. There was a recent split and a lot line adjustment because the prior, the way our code works, anything prior to 1956 that is under common ownership is deemed as merged. So this particular piece of property was merged with the land to the east. The land to the east has a house on it, And in order to split this lot, the lot line needed to be moved over slightly in order to get the proper side yard setback from the existing house to the east. And that existing house to the east is the low end house that's on the lower side. I have up in front of you, we're going to talk first about the request for the side yard variance of the 4.3 feet from the required 13-foot east side yard setback. So you can see in front of you, this is a site plan that shows contours of the land. The house that is to your right is technically, I have north going down in this case, but the house to the right is to the west. That is a new house that is completing construction right now, close to trying to finalize construction. That house, their finished floor elevation was established by the house on the other side of it to the west, as well as using the center of the vacant lot of the house to the east, because of the wide variation of what the code had in relationship to this slope of the land. So the establishment of the code for this would be the house to the east and the house to the west are averaged for their finished floor elevation, and you are allowed to build up to 1 foot above that average. So once you average the two together, it allows you to be at that average. And the problem for some very sloped pieces of land is that even if you meet that code and you're allowed to build 1 foot above, you might be 5 or 6 feet above the house to the low end, which then again causes some of the issues or problems, which is why the code was changed in the last few years. So here you can see the house to the west has a finished floor elevation of 583.61, and the house to the east is at 568.68. So it's a pretty considerable grade change between those two. The property is highlighted in the blue line, and you can see the footprint of the proposed house that is being the design of the house that is what you're going to be looking at for all of the variances this evening. I went ahead and took the front elevation to try to help you describe or understand what is happening here. So on the right-hand side, there's a solid red line. That's the finished floor elevation of the house to the west. It's at 583.61. All the way on the left-hand side, there's a solid red line with the finished floor elevation of the 568.68. There is a proposed finished floor elevation of 574. I put a dashed red line at the approximate location of that finished floor elevation coming into that house. Because of the way that the code works, because this was more than 3 feet above the house to the east, that additional setback is required to move the house a little farther over, away from that house on the low side. So I left the blue lines for the 2 property lines. The green lines are the 2 setback lines based on these finished floor elevations. And the red vertical line is where they would propose the edge of the house to be. They're not asking it to go all the way back to the original setback of the lot. But they are asking it to go, because the original setback in this lot is 8 feet. They are asking it to go back to 8.7 feet versus the required 13 feet under the code regulations. And I think I have all my lines correct. It looks a little closer, the green line to the red line on that one side, but I know that my finished floor elevations are correct and the blue lines are correct. Before I get to the next variance, questions about this first one?
Mara, I have a question.
Yes, Mel.
What did I understand correctly that a property line adjustment occurred?
Yes.
Would that having been done differently, or, the property line placed at a different point mitigated this, or would that just not have been known?
Well, it would have been known, but the problem would be then we would not have been able to split the lot, because then there would be a violation of the setback for the existing house. So they had to move that line over. It wasn't enough of a move that they still would have needed the variance.
Okay. Thank you.
What is the normal side yard setback for flat property in the A3?
A3 is an 8-foot setback.
Else have any questions on this
No.
particular item?
Okay, I will move along.
And do you
Yeah.
think that, does the height of the house have anything to do with, does that impact drainage in any way, or?
I'll let the applicant talk about that,
Okay,
because,
you're not an engineer, okay.
well, I'm not an engineer, and then the codes are the codes, so
Okay.
I would say, here's the setbacks that you need to work within, and so that would be my stance.
Okay, thank you.
So the next setback is a request for a variance of 0.7 feet from the maximum width of 23.67 feet. And I apologize, I accidentally underlined the third variance. The overall width of the house is based on what you essentially can see as the frontage. So even though portions of the house go back, we take the entire width of the house from one end to the other. The entire width of the house is proposed at 56.38 feet. That percentage is required that you do not go over. You can either have 22 feet or the 42%, whichever is greater. The greater number is 23.67 feet in width, and they would like to be at 24.38 feet in width. So that the red line is the proposed front elevation of the garage and the width that they're asking for. And then the green overall is just the overall width of the house in the relationship. I did not put tiny little green lines of where it would be. It was 0.7 of a foot. So I did not put those lines in. Any questions about this variance?
And my understanding is that the purpose of this kind of restriction is to have a front facade that doesn't appear to be a majority of garage.
Correct. That was the original intent.
And this predates you.
This does
particular-
predate me. And the interpretation of how the code was applied also predates me. So when I came in, I was explained how we interpreted these different sections of the code. I know there's been debates with some of the house developers with me over the years about how they feel that it should be interpreted. But we've been very consistent in the last more than a decade on how we have interpreted this section of the code.
And probably prior to that, if the interpretation predates you as well.
Yes. So the interpretation, in my understanding, goes all the way back to the original code amendment, which is right at about almost 20 years now. Okay, I'll move on to the third variance. So the third variance relates to there is a requirement that a front entry garage cannot sit more than 6 feet in front of the remainder of the house. So I have put in blue lines each of the front elevation, which we would consider the remainder of the front elevation of the house. You can see that there is one section all the way to the east that is 26 feet behind the front elevation of the garage. So in our code interpretation, you are not allowed to have that wall of the garage to sit more than 6 feet in front of the remainder. And we always count anything else on that front elevation as the remainder of the elevation. So they are asking to get a variance of 20 feet from the maximum projection of 6 feet in order to have the configuration of the house with the front entry garage where it is and not have to bring other portions of the house forward. Any questions on the third variance?
No.
Okay, I'm going to move on to the fourth. It ties pretty closely to that same code section. I'm going to actually go back for a second. In our code interpretation, if you are more than 4 feet in front of the remainder of the the remainder of the house is more than 4 feet in front of that garage elevation, you're required to have a architecturally integrated front porch across the remainder of the house. That is to keep the house from sort of having a snout nose garage and then not having anything else along the remainder of that elevation. So that interpretation obviously is for pretty standard houses. The proposal here, so the front elevation of the garage is that blue box. So the remainder of the elevation in the code section is intended to have a fully integrated front porch. I left the rendering that's in the packet below so that you could see a little bit more of the architectural interpretation that they're using with their overhang and some other things that they're doing. But according to our code, there is not an architecturally integrated front porch across the remainder of the house as it breaks up and goes to the chimney and the stone, and then to the other portion of the house, both sides to east and west that move farther back behind the house. So the interpretation and the request is to not be required to have an architecturally integrated covered front porch extending along the remainder of the elevation.
I'm thinking of side yard houses that you might see in Charleston that have front porches along the side yard. How does the code contemplate in that regard? Of course, you never see a garage on the front end of that either. I'm answering my own question.
Yeah, those houses wouldn't have a big garage door in front. Yeah.
Could you go back to the site plan?
Yes.
Oh, and of course my little thing is covering it up. I'll look on the email real quick, but I'm
Wait,
just
what?
looking for where that kind of left half of that comes down from the overhang is. Like I'm looking at it like it's the garage and then sort of this hallway next to the garage.
Yep.
What is just to the left of that? Is that
So this, I don't know if you can see my mouse moving, this blue line here, that's the, on the elevation, that's the chimney, the wall of the fireplace, the
so then
stone.
just below the chimney, and I think there's like a closet door to it. What is that? Like between where you have the dimension 6 and the frontage you just indicated?
Maybe, is this a question for the petition?
It might be a question for the
Okay.
petitioner.
Which is the front door and which, and what some of these openings,
Okay.
is that part of what you're asking, Mel?
Yeah, I think so, but I can ask later. Thank you.
And we can flip back and forth to these when they're up here to answer questions.
Okay.
Any other questions related to the interpretation of these codes?
Anyone else have any questions
I
for
think
for,
I understand.
Mara at this point in time? Who's here tonight in favor of docket 2418? Would you please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and then go ahead.
My name is Ben Ellerman from Blaze Architects. And we can certainly answer all of the questions. So this lot has always been vacant throughout its history. We researched the fire insurance maps and aerials. So the entire history, it's been unbuildable, and we believe
You mean unbuilt upon, not
unbuilt upon,
Okay.
based on our hardship of topography. And I was wondering how many of the board members had a chance to visit the site or even walk the site. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. If one goes to the rear, to the north, basically the northeast corner and or the southeast corner and looks to the northeast corner, it's pretty telling that there's about 14 to 15 feet of drop. And the first floor height of the house, the lower house, neighboring one at 516 to the new house at 528 is 14.93 feet between those finished floors. So we're proposing not even to be at the average. What Mara spoke about, that the average plus 1 foot would be at 470, around 477. And we're proposing to be at the 474 height.
I believe it's
570, 574, correct. So the whole design of this house is based on the topography and access in terms of the layout of the space and the garage, and also trying to limit anything to do anything harmful to the neighbor, especially the downhill neighbor. So that lot at 516, it has an MSD sinkhole in the rear yard of that property, where all the water from the neighboring homes is collected, and that's where the natural drainage patterns are. So at this image above you that's on the screen, one thing that we wanted to point out is to the east of the chimney, the house is actually cantilevered. So that cantilever, which is like 8.9 feet, allows all that water to run down and around to get past and not get directly towards the neighbor. If we built a normal developer house, which would be probably a big rectangle like the one uphill, all that water would run from the integrated porch and from the house would run straight towards that neighbor at 516. So we actually have got another exhibit that I'd like to share with the board, because I think it may be helpful to highlight some of the areas that we're talking about. I don't know, Mark, can I just show it to the board?
Put an exhibit.
Sure. Oh, no worries. So hopefully this isn't too hard to see. The area highlighted in pink is the foundation of our house. This portion here cantilevers out, this 8.9 feet. And the section highlighted in yellow, that's the part in the side yard setback that we're asking for. So the vast majority of the house does comply with the setback. There's only a small portion that does project over that, and it doesn't have foundation under it. All this is designed so the water can get around the house and be collected into the rear yard. So it doesn't, we're not building a big rectangle here just to direct all the water towards this house at 516. We're trying to be very cognizant to not do anything harmful to that neighbor. So that's the first one for the side yard setback. The width of the garage is also topography related, because we're actually required to have a retaining wall because of how it's cut into the hill. Mara, could you switch back to that cross section?
Yep.
Please. So if you look to the right side of the garage on the image on the screen, we have a retaining wall that's going to be at least 2.5 feet. And that's the full length of the driveway from the street. So when you're driving down there, and that it also runs inside the garage as well. So you can't drive right up close to a retaining wall. And that is actually going to stick up at least 4 feet into the garage itself. So it's taking up space inside that garage and limiting maneuverability, because you'll only be able to back straight out of this garage. There will also need to be a retaining wall at the property line as well, which isn't shown in this drawing, just to retain the existing earth and some of the raised earth created by the new neighboring house as well.
Repeat for me. So you've got a retaining wall that's running, as I'm looking head on at the house, on the right-hand side of the uphill side.
Right.
Right along the driveway?
Yes.
Isn't
And
that
that's-
shown on sheet C2 in our packet? The retaining wall? that
Yeah, I think it is.
Right.
So repeat how that requires you to have a wider garage, opening to your garage by 7 or 8 inches.
If we don't have that, then garage gets narrower, and as you're pulling up and backing out, it'd be much more difficult to do so. You can see how the there's a dashed angled line that cuts through the garage door. That's the existing grade that we're carving out to that triangle. We're carving that out and basically burying the western
Bare
side of the
wall.
house into the hillside by about half a story. So we're not, and that's because of the setback issue. Because if we raised the house up completely out and didn't need the retaining wall, then our setback would just keep on marching further towards the west. So we'd be asking for a larger side yard setback. So it's all related to the topography.
So it's all because of the sloping topography, retaining wall required. And you're saying then you need a wider garage to
It'd
have
make-
what, more room to move?
Well, and also when we're backing out of the garage as well, in the driveway also, and in maneuverability inside the garage as well.
Okay.
Yes,
Yeah, I follow what you're saying.
right.
Is this because, Dan, the retaining wall is also the foundation wall for the garage?
Correct. So that retaining wall will be poured out of concrete and project into the garage, probably 10 to 12 inches. And it's basically, they're going to pour that garage foundation wall that's up 4 feet and just continue it into the yard.
Continues right into the house.
Correct. That's correct. Yeah.
And you couldn't jog the wall.
We could potentially jog the wall, but I don't know how well you'd be able to actually, you don't want to have to back out and then maneuver, kind of curve around. So I guess in theory, we could dig out more yard. And then push the wall further back. It would make the wall taller. And there are some limits on how wide our driveway can be at the property line as well. This orange area in terms of the porch. This shows, so basically we're, Mara, can you go to the 3D image, please? So this is common in places that are really hilly, like in Colorado and where they have topography issues. We're actually building the front porch in front of the garage because you can so that area will stick out 10 feet, which is allowed. And it also wraps around the side. And your question, Melissa, is there's actually a walkway that goes here that is
Yeah,
on the
I
side.
see it a lot clearer. I see it more clearly now.
Right.
Thank you.
So you do enter, so there's two entrances, the main entrance in the front, but we also have a side entrance too. So that the front foyer room will also be kind of like a mudroom use off the garage, but you can also walk along the side facing porch along that side, all the way to the chimney basically. So this porch actually wraps all the way around, but it doesn't extend out further. So one of the reasons why we didn't do that is if we build that out, well, it'd be harder to do the cantilever, but also that's creating more roof area. That's basically with directing, if this is all built out here and this corner's filled in, all that's directing water straight towards that neighbor, which is what we're trying to avoid. Which is also the reason why we stepped the house back. If you build this whole area here, all that water is just going to go straight towards that neighbor. So, and I did another, I guess I can, Mark, can I show this as exhibit B? Yeah. So this is an example of what a developer, we work with a lot of developers, what they would propose. As usually it's a big rectangle with the garage and a big porch here in orange. But to build something this size, you'd have to raise it up. So it'd be at, instead of 574, it would be at 580 because of how the grade works, which means that your side yard setback instead of 13 feet would have to be 31 feet. And you see how much of the house is over that side yard setback versus the very small amount of yellow in this plan. And then the other thing is all this water from this porch and that part would go right into that neighboring house. Whereas here we have very little, we've got so much more green space and the area underneath this portion, the water will go underneath the building.
The water from your house the proposed house, where does it, it comes off the roof. Where
It'll,
is it?
it'll go into we'll have to, our civil engineer will design a dry well system, which is fairly common. But all of those have they've got an outlet pipe. So when they fill up in a rainstorm, then it'll percolate over the top. And so which is really common. That's how most houses in. West
Where will the
Jordan-
water ultimately go? I mean, you're trying to avoid the neighbor.
Right, so ideally, any water that's sheet flow in the rear yards they're gonna work its way to that sinkhole, MSD sinkhole, which is how it currently drains. And the same thing with this other new house here, the same thing, all this water goes back to that sinkhole, essentially.
Would appear that your new house, proposed house, going to stop a lot of that water or receive a lot of it.
Correct, it's actually gonna help, we'll have to collect a lot of that water and then put it in dry wells before it gets down to this house. That's correct.
Yeah, so it's not, the plan isn't in your proposal to have it sheet drain
Correct.
across the property line, because looking at the topos, it's still draining toward the house.
Right. Yeah.
Correct,
Can't
but
help
there's
it.
more, the rain, that water that does fall in between, there's much more yard area to collect that water, and there's more distance between the two houses.
But the intent would be to modify the grade or do something to direct that water, because the document I'm looking at here shows topo lines that will drive the water toward that neighboring house.
Right.
Yeah, the topo line, these are the existing topo lines.
Right.
And
You're not showing us proposed grading.
the existing, that is correct, yeah.
I wanted to be clear for the record, because
Correct.
Yeah.
Right, it's not our intent to do anything disadvantageous to the neighbor down the
So,
hill.
so you did look at or thought about, gave consideration to building a more quote traditional house, or, and what was the drawback of that?
The drawback
Pete,
of
you
that,
did allude to it here a second.
well, a couple things, the drawback, so a builder would normally build a two-story house that would just tower over this house. Our house on the rendering, that roof line is only 5 feet greater than the lower house down below. If this was a two-story house like this, built up, the basement would be a story. So you'd end up with a 3.5-story house and have to go for a variance for the 3-story rule. It would just tower over this house, which is not our intent. So we're only building a 1-story home.
Yeah.
And that roof by the chimney, that part, is that peak by the chimney is only 5 feet greater than the neighboring house.
So if you build the house got on that sheet of paper, it's going to be quite a bit higher than the,
Right, if we built
Neighbor.
one as tall as like similar to the one at 528, it would just tower over that. It would
Yeah.
tower over that.
tower over the one
The lower one
mile,
at 560.
downhill.
Correct.
Yeah.
So we're trying not to do that. That's correct.
Fair enough.
And unfortunately, the relatively new ordinance, it doesn't really take into account the height of the final house, whether it's 1-story or 2-story. And we would argue that it may not comply. It's in the spirit of it because we're not towering over that neighbor.
Can we go back to the porch? So you have you're proposing a significant overhang in front of the garage. And then,
It's 10 feet out and 36 feet wide if you go from the wraparound to the edge of that porch.
right,
roof.
and then, so is this walkway all covered as well?
The majority of it is, all along the side of the doors is covered. There's a planter in the front that isn't covered, but it does wrap all the way around and it is all covered. That's correct. So it's a wraparound side porch.
Why are you coming out so far over the garage?
Right.
In terms of the front entry,
Yes.
Well,
oh,
you're out over the entry to the garage.
correct. So
Is
that,
so you get a roof line that,
it's usable porch space without having to build an elevated porch that's going to be disadvantaged to the neighbors. So if instead of building the porch to in front of the chimney, we're putting it in front of the garage. So it works with the topography. We're not fighting the topography.
How is that usable porch space?
Yeah.
I'm just
It's a garage.
curious, you know.
We put out some chairs on, tons of people use their garages and roof spaces
So the
as.
garage is like, if you want to park a car, you gotta get all your furniture out of the way to get the car in, type thing.
I mean, yeah, but lots of people have spaces like that where they use that front area as a porch. It's not as common at this part of the country, but it's very common out west.
Yeah.
And if we did build the porch on the other side, it would be more roof area, getting more water towards that neighbor.
Well,
The other advantage of this, of course, is that since we're pushed back like that, we're not blocking their views as much. There's more yard between us and them. So there are a lot of advantages of doing it this way.
So I want to follow up on a couple of things you said, because, obviously what we're concerned about here is making sure that we've got a burden that's met. It's unusual for us to be considering 4 variances on a brand new build. I think you've been here before and seen a new build and how we handle variances there. We've got precedent that we need to be considering. And I want to make sure we're clear on what the hardship is that's claimed for each of these variances. There are 4 variances. And I think I understand the height, the elevation change, but you'd mentioned for the garage, for the width of the garage, that the retaining wall on the west side of that affects maneuverability of vehicles. How does it affect maneuverability of vehicles?
If you look at the image behind you up on the screen, or probably on your screen, you can't just go right. If that's narrower, if you're in your driveway, you can't open your car door. If the garage gets super narrow inside, it's the same sort of thing. It's not like most garages have like a little stem wall that sticks up this way, like 8 inches, and then there's a little bit of space before the wall starts. This isn't like that. The wall inside the garage is going to be like this tall. So that's going to stick in because it's retaining all that earth. That's probably going to be like a foot thick. So so the usable amount of space inside the garage is smaller than it would be normally if we were on a flat lot. And it's all caused by the topography.
Sure, but there's lots of garages, single car garages across the city. I mean, this is something where you're trying to fit a usable 2-car garage on the front of this property. Is that accurate?
That is correct.
Are there other options you've considered with detached garage or side entry or rear?
Yeah,
garage?
we talked to Mara about the side entry, but that actually in this case would also require variance. Is that correct, Mara? Because I think we did have that discussion early on that a side entry garage would still require a variance because of how far the rest of the house is set back. And then if we had a detached, you'd be driving down so steeply to get down to that area, and we'd be building it at the back down low by that sinkhole, which we're trying to avoid. So those are some of the reasons why and covering more yard area by doing it. So there are topography issues of ingress and egress, and it's our understanding that the side entry garage would also need a variance.
And did you put something together that found the variance? I don't want to assume something, but is there?
I know we met multiple times, but a side entry garage wouldn't necessarily need 3 variances, might have only needed 2 variances if they were still, again, going to put it this far out. But we went through a couple different scenarios. So
Sure.
I can't specifically remember the exact configuration and how many variances it might have needed. But if it was sitting too far in front, it still would have needed the architecturally integrated front porch one, as well as they wouldn't need the maximum width and the projection. Those were the 2, if I remember
And
correctly.
the other difficulty is to do that because it's sloping, we would need a super tall retaining wall to support that driveway. So we would have a retaining wall at 6 or maybe 8 feet to be able to turn in, or you'd have to dig it down but I think it's too steep to actually dig it down to have a basement one for the actual slope. So those are some of the other difficulties with the side.
Okay, I'm not following something here. If you have your retaining wall,
Mhm.
and that's going to run right back and
Into the garage.
into the house, or that be eventually be part of the house. So if you had a smaller, if that retaining wall was right there, and you had a 7-inch smaller garage door. And it seems like you'd have more space if you backed your car out between the car and the retaining wall. I mean, I'm not following.
Yeah, I'm not following how this is different from a regular, the garage door is not as wide as the garage, but but my garage has solid walls. There's no like step or anything like that. So if I get too close to the wall, I can't open the garage door either. So I mean, the door, I can't open the car door in the garage. So I'm not quite following the logic of, I mean, I understand that
If it was a flat lot, we wouldn't have any of those sorts of issues. So you wouldn't have any car door opening or maneuverability issues. If it was flat, then that all the stuff sticking out would be a non-issue. So it's actually in the driveway and in the garage itself. It's not as functional because of the retaining wall.
Let's use an example.
I don't understand how the dimension of 8 inches is taking away functionality in the garage.
I mean, you could make an example here. Let's just say you're going to have a single car garage door opening. So you can still have the garage the size you've got it. See, now you only got one car. Now, no, that's not what you want, but you've got a lot of room, providing there's one car in a driveway. So I guess I'm just having trouble with, on the garage door opening, how that relates, where the hardship is, I guess, is what I'm looking at. Get the retaining wall. But then why you have to have the wider garage door opening, I'm having trouble with that piece of it.
would you like to come forward and help answer some of these questions? Okay, I need you to raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, please state your name and then go ahead.
Can you
You
speak
can
into
speak into the microphone.
Walter Widmer.
Okay,
The wall that we're referring to, the retaining wall, so it's flat on the outside, so it's uniform with the outside of the building. So the foundation wall has to project into the garage itself. So that's why it's taking up more space. That's why we want a wider garage overall. You understand? It's like, so if this is your normal wall in a garage, the foundation is going to be that far into the garage.
Okay, so the foundation wall is thicker,
Retaining wall.
wider.
Right, because we're putting the house into the side of the hill to give it a low profile to have it blend into the property.
I see this on the floor plan, but it still looks like on either side of the garage door, there's 2 feet inside the garage.
I just don't see it.
And Mara, there isn't really a way for you to zoom in more, is there, on that image? There's a thicker wall on the right-hand side, which would be the west, than there is on the other side. So so the usable space on that side is limited by that wall projecting it.
See it.
But it's hard to see.
It's not your conventional standard wall, 2x4s and outside exterior, inside finish sheet rock. You're gonna have a bigger chunk of concrete sitting there. And this is being built as a forever house, so it's for a bunch of 70-plus-year-olds moving in there for the rest of our lives. And I don't know about you guys, I need more space in the garage to get in and out of my car.
I understand that, yeah. Okay, so let's just go back and talk about the hardship here.
oh, and excuse me, sir, stay up here.
Stay up here.
Because you raised your hand when we were talking about the overhang. of the
You're
porch
good to
as
go
well.
for the night here.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're good to go.
So you need, because you want a 2-car garage.
Yes, sir.
You're trying for it.
Mhm.
So you need to have the garage wider because the wall's going to take up more space,
Interior space, correct.
interior space. About how much more, how thick will that wall be?
At least a foot. At least a
If
foot.
if I drive by and look at a typical house being built, how thick is the foundation wall?
Usually it's 8 inches, but it only sticks up 4 to 8 inches above the concrete slab. It doesn't stick up
Okay, so this is going to stick up further,
4 feet.
4 feet further. Be thicker, come up further once the retaining wall gets to the corner of the garage.
Because the house is being projected into the side of the,
Yeah, side of the topography, the hill.
so it keeps a lower.
No, it's a
profile.
retaining. Move it over.
So you had to build a thicker wall.
Because the front of that is half a story into the grade, approximately.
Okay, so I have another question on the overhang or the front porch of the garage. I don't understand that concept. I've never been introduced to that before.
My intent is as a portico, it provides, my significant other and I, we want to be able to bring family and friends in from around the country to visit. And so we want to have the capability of having, so when visitors come, they can park under the portico and have covered access in bad weather because most of our friends and family are our age. And it gives us protection from the elements and partial coverage for them when they come and visit.
So it's in essence covered parking. It's not really a porch.
Yeah, it's really, yeah, however you want to
It's-
term it.
It's covered parking. And then my question is, without the integrated porch, you know, you're running the risk if your guests park in the driveway in front of the garage door, I don't know how they're gonna stay out of the rain to get to the front door if you don't have, because the planter area is not covered. So you're walking, you know,
We can get in through.
and us old people, we don't like to get wet because we melt, you know.
Where is the front door? Is it on the,
There's two.
is
There's
it,
an entry into a mud door, 6 feet from the front of the.
that's 6 feet from the front of the garage, directly in, okay. So there's not another door along the side or anything there.
There's one further back by the chimney.
Yeah,
Okay, that's what I thought I saw, okay.
right
So
there.
you've got a mud room or something there when you,
Yeah,
And that'll be the primary entrance from the.
and
garage.
that'll be where you go into the garage. Yeah, okay, I follow that.
oh. Yeah, it's the garage door opens there. I see what you, yeah,
Yes.
I got it. I see now. There's a garage door, there's a front door, there's another front access as well.
Right, but once again, if you're coming from the front of the garage, not inside the garage, you're coming from the front of the garage, you will not be walking on a walkway, an elevated walk that's covered the entire way.
That's 6 feet, yeah, that 6 feet is not
It's
covered.
6 feet back, but you'd have to go all the way around the planter.
Right, so this,
Right.
that, both the doors have coverage, but you have to walk around the planter. at the
Right.
way.
Right, and
That is
the
correct.
walk around the planter is what's not being covered because you don't have an integrated front porch.
Well, it's a wraparound porch that has a planter blocking the corner essentially.
Partially covered wraparound porch.
Yes.
That you can park under too.
Right.
But it doesn't wrap
Portico share.
all the way. Like, am I right, Mara, that if, for it to be integrated, wouldn't it have to cross in front of where the chimney is too?
Correct. In front of the chimney and then the other portions
And
of
the
the
other
house on both sides. Correct.
The city would require us to have a front porch
Both sides.
in front of the chimney.
And the side, and the western side in front of the room behind the.
All of these blue areas,
All the blue.
every blue area with the exception of in front of the garage
Okay,
per the code.
so even on to the right of the garage on the uphill side, there'd be required to have something.
Even though that roof is only
Yeah.
probably 4 feet above grade right there, 4 to 5 feet above grade.
So you plan to save a lot of the trees
We
to
actually
the
We actually
downhill.
are. Yeah, we designed it in such a way that we're saving almost all of them.
I like trees. The house I'm in on Lee now, I ended with 5 trees and I have over 50.
You have a lot, I knew that.
Well, no, actually, my lot on Lee is narrower than this one. It's deeper, but as far as about 73 feet.
Hmm.
And I've done extensive terracing because I have the same problem in my house now, because it's also on the edge of a basin. So I have a pretty precipitous drop from the western edge to the eastern edge.
Yeah,
So
you
I
do.
had to do a lot of landscaping and terracing to slow down the water.
Got 2 more questions if I can.
So just kind of a simple question here. If the board were not to grant the variance as far as garage width, is the plan to just go with the size, the maximum that fits there, or is it to rework where the garage would be?
I would think that we would try to modify it so it's still in the same location. I don't really know if there's another solution that wouldn't require other variances, basically, so.
Well, the detached one would fit, right? Or a detached garage would fit without a variance.
We wouldn't, if the variance is granted on this house, I don't believe our driveway would be wide enough to get past the house to get down there.
And then that's
Is that-
a much more hard surface to deal with water runoff. We'd have to take out a heck of a lot more trees.
The driveway would be super steep on
Right.
that
And
side.
I understand all that. We are talking about a fresh build though. So, right, you're trying to match that with what is currently on paper, but you could rework it so the garage would be in the rear, the driveway would fit and there's no variances required, correct?
It's a forever house. I want to be able to go from my garage into my home without having to go outside.
So I understand that, I do. And we get people who come in here all the time with what they want to do with their garage and what they end up being told is what the lot allows for them to do with their garage. So I'm just asking.
Topography would be an issue with the grade and driveway, even to get to a detached garage behind us. It would be an issue. Because of how steep the driveway would have to be and building retaining walls to make it work. Because it is such a significant drop from front to back.
What if to the west, to the uphill side of your lot, what if you brought the garage over another foot or
The more we.
if that retaining wall was going into your garage, only you had the garage wall over more to the uphill side by maybe a foot or so.
Yeah, if we shifted the wall there'd be difficulties with,
I mean,
ideally, you don't want to have the wall and then have to flash it and water intrusion issues so close to grade, termites, all those sorts of things, and not have the face of the wall line up with the concrete. So that would be the main reason we wouldn't want to do that in this situation, because it is so close to grade. And there will be a good amount of water running around that part.
so one more, I'm calling it 1 foot. I mean, maybe wouldn't be that, or maybe it wouldn't be much more if you made your garage another foot wider.
The more we shift it to that, the more we're buried into the hillside. So that's just the trade-off. The more we shift it over. So if it lined up with that side part of the house, we'd be another foot or 18 inches deeper into grade, which is what we're trying to avoid.
And originally, my first idea was to put the garage in the back, because I am not a proponent. I don't care for garages in the front. I personally detest them. But in order to do that, the foundation work would have been cost prohibitive to put it in the back, which would have allowed access into the house from the garage.
When cost can't be a factor for variances,
Oh, no, I know.
but it wouldn't be possible to, without giant retaining walls, to have it at the same level. To have the garage at the same level without building up giant retaining walls for the driveway because of the topography.
So my second question then, I know as far as the other 3 variances, I think they were all related to stormwater runoff or practically, that was the issue that was created you were trying to solve. Have you had any stormwater tests or any professional, any expert that's examined this site?
We
And
are,
it's-
we're working with the civil engineer. We've actually been dealing with runoff issues from the property above.
Hmm.
And they regraded into our property and actually raised the grade in parts of it 12 to 18 inches higher than even the contours you're seeing. So our walls may have to be even taller than what we're planning. Yeah, there's giant ruts, which you can talk about from the uphill neighbors that are cutting across the property. So this property, because of stuff that's happening uphill, does have water issues. And we're trying to mitigate that, so we're not passing that problem on to the downhill neighbor.
So the real question then is, who is it that makes the statement that the design currently with the 26 feet on the east side of the frontage, that helps to solve that issue?
The stepping back of the building, it creates more distance between us and the neighboring property, which is advantageous. We don't have a civil engineer here, but I'm fairly confident they would testify that it's advantageous to have more space between us and the neighbors.
The more ground space you have, that's
I'm
more.
sorry, which neighbor are you speaking of?
The
The
lower neighbor at 516.
The lower neighbor.
Yeah,
Wrong.
I personally have spent many weekends in the Magner's basement, squeegeeing the basement out into the sinkhole with all the flooding that comes off that hill. So I'm going to do everything I can to mitigate that and prevent.
So I'm sorry, Ben, you're saying that that's one of the reasons why the remainder of the house is not closer to Bacon,
Correct.
is to avoid additional water to the house, to the left as you face the property. Okay.
correct.
In the driveway. What do you call
Yeah, the sinkhole portion.
it? No, the dry, the retaining ponds for runoff.
Yeah, well, like a rain garden. Right.
Does any board members have any other questions for either the petitioner's representative or the property owner? Mel, are you okay? All
I don't have any other questions.
right.
We do have someone online.
I was gonna ask. Is there anyone, you guys can have a seat for now. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak in favor of docket 2418?
So I am
Uh,
Mr. Mag.
Hello?
Oh, yep.
Hello?
hello, are you speaking in favor of docket 2418?
Can you hear me? This is Robin Magner.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah,
Thank
I'm
you.
the neighbor at 516 Bacon. I've known
Okay,
Walter.
wait a minute, sir.
Okay.
I need you to raise your right hand.
Okay.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay, now please go ahead.
My name's Robin Magner. I'm the neighbor on 516 Bacon who sold Walter that lot on at 524 Bacon Avenue. That was in our family for, since the 1920s. That house is a well-designed house. I'm a retired home builder. I've known Walter since I was a baby. We grew up together, and I think it's a very well-designed house. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, we can hear
Okay.
you.
And you look at what's been done on Bacon up the street there. They've built all these big, tall, white clad buildings with black roofs, almost every one of them. And Walters is a well-designed house, and maybe there's a few tweaks in it that don't quite meet Webster's codes, but will really add to the neighborhood. It is that's the kind of house Webster needs, is well-designed houses that fit into the sites. And I know with the little berm along this, or a little swale on this house, on the east side of Walter's house, we can control the water. There's always been a water issue in our basement there. But that's just, I am in favor of Walter's plan. It'll add to the neighborhood. And I think the few variances he's asking for are reasonable. And that's all.
Does anyone have any questions for this individual? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Is there anyone else in favor of docket 2418? Is there anyone who'd like to speak in opposition to docket 2418? Hearing none, seeing none, we'll close the public session and move into board discussion.
Can I just make a quick note? I noticed as I was going through the slides that the wrong title is at the top of the slides. So just for the record, this is 2418 and it is 524 Bacon. And I have the wrong title at the very top of the slides.
That's why I kept going back to my agenda, not the screen. We probably need to address these variances individually, correct, Peter?
Yes.
Okay, so can we have a motion for the first variance, which is the side yard east setback variance? So we can start discussing.
I move in favor of, we approve the side yard variance of 4.3 feet from the required 13-foot east side yard setback.
I'll second.
I'll start off and say on this variance, with the slope of the property and the adjustment done within the city code that brought this variance, at least what it is here on paper, that the lot presents a hardship because it goes downhill at a pretty rapid clip. And I think we've stated earlier the footage drop. So I can see a need for that variance.
I guess I don't have as much problem with this variance now that I've heard this
Yeah.
as I would normally, but I am concerned if we end up with what the petitioner's representative categorized as a builder's cookie cutter house, and this variance is granted. I mean, we have no guarantee that this one-story house with the cantilevered area is what's going to be built, correct?
Because the application has these exhibits, it is related to this. So
Okay.
if someone came back in with
Something different,
Something
they'd
It would
they'd
be
need to
another
come back
whole-
to this board?
yes.
Okay.
Well, that's reassuring.
That is reassuring because I
Right.
think that the lower profile house is different from the kind of thing that we were seeing, the big two-story house with the basement the basement level more than halfway out of grade. That was the impetus for this increased side yard setback. At least that was my observation.
I mean, I think frankly, this is a hardship that they're trying to deal with. This is a water management problem. Trying to build a house that's between two other homes. And I think they're making an effort to ameliorate a hardship that actually exists for more houses than theirs. This one I actually can understand in terms of being a hardship and something that would be attempting to rectify that.
Mel, do you have any comments on this?
The one thing I was gonna say is that, going into this setback, adds a little width to the house that almost mitigates the width of the garage portion of the front. So I am in favor of it for that reason.
All right, are we ready for the vote on the first variance? All in favor of the a side yard variance of 4.3 feet from the required 13-foot east side yard setback, please say aye.
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 All opposed? Tom, would you please poll the board?
John Burse,
Aye.
Mel Wilson,
Aye.
Randy Sprague,
Aye.
Debbie Sahlberg.
Aye.
I, Tom Walsh.
So the first one has been approved. We need a motion for the second variance of 0.7 feet from the maximum width of 13.67 feet for the front entry garage.
I move the acceptance of a variance of 0.7 feet from the maximum width of 23.67 feet in order to build a new single-family home that has a 24.38 foot wide garage.
I would second that motion.
All right, so
This is the one where I'm still not seeing the hardship. Having a two-car garage is not something we're empowered to see as a hardship that we can grant a
Right.
variance for.
and it could still be a two-car garage. It just will be a tighter two-car garage.
That's right.
That's what I'm thinking too, because if a parking space is 9 feet wide, two would be 18 feet, so that's,
You was calculated.
it seems like
The same
this
thing.
is, I know it's minor, but that it's so minor, it could almost just be dealt with and addressed.
Tom, what do you think?
Well, I think my comments have been directed. I'm struggling with this variance and I see what they're trying to do. And I'm not an architect, but I'm wondering if they could relook at that wall or if they wanted to,
Or,
or just go with the smaller opening.
I mean, well, it's not even the opening, it's the actual garage.
right.
isn't
Yeah,
it?
right. That's what I
And,
mean.
and the reality of it is that, you know, I'm part of it. We only have one car garage. So only one of the cars ever goes in the garage, but I'm part of a two-car family of older drivers. And when, you know, if we go together, we could take the car that has more room to get in and out of. And if we go separately, you know, you don't need to get out on the passenger side.
Right.
So, I mean, that's just anecdotal, not necessarily a
I mean,
hardship, but I don't believe they,
It sort of comes down to, look, I mean, this is the code. I don't see the hardship that would cause me to say this code should be altered. I fail to see that. I mean, I could argue architectural is not, that's not in our judgment. That's not what we do.
Right.
But I'm yet to find the hardship that would make me think that you couldn't come into compliance with city code.
anyone else have any comments on the second variance before we?
I
go?
have one question.
Yes, Mel.
Does this project have to go to ARB?
Yes, it does.
It does. I don't know if your mic was on.
Sorry, yes, it does.
Okay, but it
goes to
it won't-
variances first because they need to determine those
Yeah.
before we look at the design.
Okay, thank you.
I would just also add, well, we're not necessarily empowered to grant a variance on the basis of having a two-car garage of a certain width.
Right.
I'm certainly sensitive to the idea that this
We're
is
looking at a
a
hardship
stay,
that requires.
every
Yeah.
stay for the rest of your life kind of house, and it's
Right,
built on a
right.
site that has some topographic challenges that would suggest making it accessible for the long haul of one's life, a challenge.
Right.
Maybe only one car, as you said, Deb, goes in the garage at a time.
Right, at a point.
Point.
Or at a point, there's, you know, you only need one car because you only have one driver.
Yeah.
So,
And I don't want to make judgments about one car or two cars or whatever, but I want to be careful that we think about whether, when we set a precedent by changing something that does not have, you know, a hardship attached to it, I think that is a major precedent and we have to be careful when we do that. And to me, that's the critical issue here.
Okay.
are we ready to vote on the second variance then? So all in favor of the variance of 0.7 feet from a maximum garage width of 24.67 feet with a front entry garage that's 24.38 feet wide, please say aye. All opposed?
Nay.
Opposed, nay.
Would you please poll the board?
John Burris,
Nay.
Mel Wilson,
Nay.
Randy Sprague.
Nay.
Debbie Sahlberg.
Nay.
Tom Walsh, nay.
Okay, so the second variance has been denied. We need a motion for the third request, which is a variance of 20 feet from the maximum projection of 6 feet in order to build a new single-family dwelling with a front entry garage that sits 26 feet in front of the remainder of the front elevation of the house.
I still move, we approve that we vote on it.
I'll second that.
I'll say this comes back to the topography. And what I'm hearing tonight, you're designing a house, would be very hard to design a traditional type house because of the slope of that property. The neighbor down low would be looking. I think the topography, the lay of the land, and the water runoff that's going to go back ultimately into the neighbor's yard is inlet. So I think the dwelling takes that into account, the proposed house.
Well, and I know
I think
that,
there's a hardship.
and we're not approving the design,
No.
but I do feel that this, as shown by the petitioner and the owner, does not appear to be a traditional, builder house with a front entry garage that sticks away, the snout house that the planning director referred to, that we're trying to avoid.
I agree with that.
And once again, we're not approving a design,
No.
but if something is significantly different, it would have to come back to this board.
You are correct, based on the application that is on file with the request for variances.
Yeah, I find the issue of the topography, the existing trees, to be compelling toward granting this variance.
And I think the other thing is that they've clearly considered the water runoff issues. Because to try to put it in another place and put more hard packed concrete down is not going to help the scenario that they're trying to mitigate. I can see this as a hardship and an attempt to design a way out from under that.
Yeah, the water runoff is a hardship.
I think that is.
Are we ready to,
Okay, I'll call for the question.
okay. All in favor of the variance of 20 feet from the maximum projection of 6 feet in order to build a front entry garage that sits 26 feet in front of the remainder of the front elevation of the house, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Would you please poll the board?
John Burse,
Aye.
Mel Wilson,
Aye.
Randy Sprague.
Aye.
Debbie Sahlberg.
Aye.
Tom Walsh, aye.
So the third variance has been approved. So the fourth request is to not be required to have an architecturally integrated covered front porch extending along the remainder of the front elevation. Can we have a motion?
So moved.
Yeah,
Second.
thank you.
Say it again.
I kind of understand what is being asked for here, but I think it's too much of a departure and from the intent of the ordinance to merit supporting it. The fact that you walk out from underneath the space,
Yeah, I guess, I mean, I can understand based on the slide that the planning director prepared for us that showed where, the covered porch, the integrated covered porch is supposed to go the whole front of the house. And I could see varying from that requirement.
Good as well.
But I
Oh.
do have some concerns about, guests are coming to the front door, not being, walking on an elevated pathway that's not covered.
and the language of abandoning having to be required to have an integrated covered front porch is the question that we're considering at this moment.
Well, if this were to go to the Architectural Review Board at some point,
Uh-huh.
is it possible that they can, you know, come up with something?
Well, the
But
architectural.
that's not
review-
what we're voting on.
Right.
Architecture Review Board does not design things for people. They basically just are supposed to say, yes, this is okay, or no, it's not.
So we're,
They do struggle with that because,
if we, okay, so we're also talking about doing something on the uphill side of the garage there in front of.
well, because that one slide Mara showed, the integrated front porch would have to run the whole
Oh,
front
that's,
of the house, both sides of the garage. Yeah, so.
Which I think would look sort of odd
Yes.
on this house.
I think it would look kind of odd too. I mean, excuse me, Mr. Bontrager, what we're struggling with, I think, is we don't necessarily think that the integrated porch is required along the entire frontage, but we do have some concerns about, you know, about having this walkway to the front door not being covered, you know, for a portion of it.
So you have right now, the motion has been made.
Oh, Peter, I can't hear you.
Sorry.
You have right now a motion that's been made to approve the variance as it's been requested. You can, if you would choose to do so, vote on that, and if it did not pass, you could have another motion, or you could have someone modify the current motion that amends what you would be voting on. So, you know, just to keep things simple, if somebody's requesting a 2-foot variance from a setback, you could modify that and grant a 1-foot setback on a variance. If you wanted, if they're requesting a variance from this architecturally integrated covered side porch, you could modify their request so that it matches what you believe is appropriate in this situation.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting in that regard. Simply rotating the planter in the proposed design would allow that space to be completely integrated from the front of the garage all the way to the main entry door. I think that what we're being asked to vote on here is removing the requirement of any
Yeah, I'll vote
integrated
off.
front porch.
But what I believe the city attorney is saying is that we could either withdraw the motion that's under consideration and make a modified motion that would say that an integrated covered front porch to the front door from
Oh, yeah.
the, not necessarily the entire front
Yeah.
facade of
No, I know
it.
where you're going. Yeah.
Is that,
I mean, my thought was the following, that, okay, if what you could do is say, we're not going to allow, no, we'll deny this, but we would welcome a reapplication of a variance that modified that in such a way that you had a different sort of porch in front, perhaps one that covers the entry area but does not necessarily cross the entire front. I'd be willing to, that would be a different type of variance. And I would argue that you could make the case that would be a hardship because you're going to build a porch in front of where your cars are going to go.
is it necessary for us to deny this request and make them come back? We could modify it.
I think if you deny it, it might start a 1-year timer where they can't bring it back.
Right. I
Okay.
don't want to do.
And I don't know that, and I don't want to do that. Was not my intent. That was not my
Would you
intent.
care to amend your motion?
No, I didn't actually make that as a motion. I suggested that was a possibility.
Who was the maker of the?
Randy was.
No, I wasn't. I seconded it.
I
Oh, no,
thought-
I believe it. I did. So made. So you're right. You're correct. It's my motion. So
Why don't we vote on the motion before the board and then
let's make a new
make a
motion.
new motion?
Wait,
Right.
so we have the right, we can do that? So we're voting here tonight to, that the applicant's not required to have covered front porch across the front of the house.
And if we deny that, can we then make another motion?
You are in board action right now, so if you deny it and it's denied at the close of the meeting, we've closed public hearing, we won't have another hearing. That's when we start the one-year
That's the problem.
timeframe. So if you've got a motion right now that fails by a vote, and somebody makes a second motion that's related to the request, you can have that motion heard now. There's no timer on there. We could even, if you chose to do so, leave this open, but we are in board action now. Public hearing has been closed. There could be a motion to reopen public hearing if you're asking for additional information to be brought at a future date. But the only issue would be if you're trying to have something be reheard and you vote and that vote fails and then you close the meeting, that we've got a 1-year time.
I guess I don't know if I see how amending the motion or changing the decision to cover basically that corner. I don't feel like that makes it a integrated porch at all. So I don't feel like it.
I guess my point is it would be an integrated porch to get you from the front of the house to the front door.
Yeah, I think versus setting the precedent of abandoning having an integrated front porch, which is what the motion asks us to do. Let's have something that, explores a finesse move where the porch could be more strongly integrated. from the
They're
front door
requesting
to the front of
that
the house.
not have a porch that goes all across the front of the house, front of the fireplace.
I'm not saying
And
that.
all that.
Yeah.
I think we might be overthinking this a little bit.
Yeah.
Another thing, I mean, hey, if you want to build a house and somebody has to walk 6 feet in the rain or the snow, that's their choice.
Well, except.
That's
that-
what I was sort of thinking too, that
I
it's
mean-
just sort of a design decision.
Well, but the reason, but one of the hardships, I mean, they made that, one of the hardships was they don't want people to have to walk in the rain.
Part of the design decisions aren't hardships. And that's what we decide on. We mitigate a code because there's a hardship. And the fact that your design doesn't fit the code is not a hardship. And I think we have to bear that in mind.
But the other way to not need this requirement at all would have been not to have needed the third variance. Is that correct? It was the extension of the garage is what requires a fully integrated porch. And if it didn't, if you didn't have a garage that came out this far, would you have to have a porch at all?
Right.
Or could you just have a stoop?
And this is a request. So we're acting on a request. Technically, right? Not a variance.
It's a petition for a variance is what they've made.
It's a variance.
So they're
But it's
requesting,
really a variance.
they're requesting a variance from the code.
Right.
That's
because
the
code
petition.
requires.
Okay.
And that's the hard.
Okay,
Yeah.
so do we want to vote on on the motion that's before the board and then consider, and then or do we want to amend this variance, or do we want to just?
Think about it. I don't know.
So what's the hardship? The hardship is somebody might,
No, the hardship is that I don't believe they've demonstrated a hardship, because the hardship is, as Randy says, the code requires an integrated front porch if you have a front entry garage that extends more than 6 feet in front of the house.
So is it the same hardship from the second and third request where it's relating to the grade change and mitigating the stormwater issues? Because it is, because the garage goes that far out, which we've now said is reasonable.
But that doesn't mitigate, that has no bearing on whether you have to put a porch on.
No, I
I'm
just mean
sorry.
in terms of the hardship.
I don't understand how you would say that. There's no hardship that says you can't put a screen porch there,
Well, a covered porch.
or covered porch. It just doesn't, that has nothing to do with topography or drainage or anything else. It's a design decision, and I understand it. Believe me, I'm trying to figure out a way that we can mitigate this.
Now, I will add what we were talking about before as far as reapplication, all of that. They can present a new design, even if it's only slightly modified within a year. That could be brought at the next meeting.
Right.
Well, not the next one. Well, be whatever. I don't know when it would be at this point with the
Right.
notice requirements, but it wouldn't have to be a year from now.
Right.
They just can't bring back the exact same thing within a year.
Right. My argument would be they've gone to school, they see what the concern is. Why not come back with another, it may be a variance in the sense that it's not full, but now there would be perhaps a mitigating reason, the design of the garage, the way this is built, the way you don't want to put a porch in front of two cars coming in. I understand that, but that's a separate request to me.
Okay, so,
Does that
And-
make sense?
yeah,
Okay.
I think it does begin to make
Okay.
sense. And what you've said, Mr. Bontrager, is that we wouldn't have to wait a year
No.
if they came back with something that was a little different than what we are seeing tonight
Correct.
for the front entry garage. Okay, are we ready? And why, can we ask the petitioner what he means by?
You have to open it back up in order to take any comments from anyone who's here.
I'll motion that we open the meeting back up to take comments from public,
All right, do we have a second? Do
the applicant rather.
we have a second to open? up the
What's
meeting?
what's the hardship here on this?
No, the petitioner would like to
Comment.
has a
Comment.
comment.
I'm
That's what we're talking about right
Oh,
now.
right.
Do we have a second?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, all in
Let's
favor
open-
of
let's talk.
reopening the public session so the petitioner can make a comment, please say aye.
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 All opposed? Okay, come on out.
Help
You're
us.
still under oath, Ben.
Thank you. I appreciate you taking, Mr. Widmer, two things to add to the board. Otherwise, we can always table and come back next month if the board would allow it. He's willing to remove the planter and we would ask the board, whether it's now or later, to consider that western side that's uphill because it would actually, there's only like 4 or 5 feet. You can't put a porch on the west side of the garage, to consider that in the motion, because the code would require that, but it's impractical because of the topography on that side. So we would ask the board to consider that. Otherwise, we can come back for this one next month if you would allow it.
So to do what we're talking about, just put it, is not a practical.
Definitely not on the west side.
Solution.
Not on the west side, because unless you're a kid, you're not gonna be able to stand under it.
So
Point taken.
your proposal is that
Boy.
you would be willing to have an integrated covered front porch as long as it was on the east side
That,
of the garage and not require the integrated front porch on the west side of the garage.
that is correct. Either by removing the planter, or if the board decided, even though we would prefer not to extend it across the remainder of the east elevation in front of the chimney. We think that's not as practical because of the topography and the water issues, but if the board required it, we could work with that.
You know, as my colleague here, design's not our purview, but rather than moving the planter, simply rotating the planter would allow that.
I mean, I would like to state to the board that I came here right around, I've been working for Blaze Architects for almost 20 years when this ordinance came about. I would argue that it actually is an architectural ordinance. So there were a lot of houses being built, which we call like the snout house, where they'd build like this 36 by 50 rectangle and have the garage stick out in front. It was an architectural reason to break up the rest of the elevation to add that porch. That's why the review board, which actually helped, I think Mike Blaze worked to help for some of the zoning stuff with Roger Grow back then to rework that. So that was the intent. Our porch is turned on the side. So we still have a porch in the front and the side. It's a wraparound if you take out so the intent was to have porch. Because basically what the builders were doing is they were building a rectangle with the garage and nothing else. They didn't have any cover at all. And that was why that ordinance came to be back in the early 2000s.
Well, I mean, I think this is an interesting proposal. It's a creative approach to a very challenging site. I find the conversation of this extended canopy as part of a front porch-like space interesting and creative. As a board member, I want to be careful we're not setting a precedent for
I mean, I would say that
an outhouse coming along. you
we
know,
have
down the road.
36 feet of that covered area in front of the garage, and it wraps back another 26 feet. So the 36 plus 26, that's almost equals the length of our whole 56 of the house. We have a lot of porch area. It's just not the traditional porch area. So I just
It's a
would like to point
wraparound
that out.
porch.
Right. But the
But
point,
that
the point
you can
about
drive your car into.
the point about the planter is a valid point. So, so we'll leave it up to the board, but it'd be nice not to have it, especially that western side, because it's really not practical to have it on that western side.
Okay,
We see that.
that's fair.
Okay, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. So are we ready to move back into board? board
Okay,
discussion?
yes.
So I'm not sure,
Let's
But-
read out a new motion here. What's?
well, no, we have a motion on the floor. We either need to withdraw that or deny it or modify it,
Need
correct?
to go back into closed session first.
Okay, well, we don't normally do a motion to
I
go
know.
into closed session.
Just
but-
Identify
Okay, all
the.
right. Do we have a motion to go back into closed session?
So
Second, all in
Second.
favor?
Aye,
All
Aye.
opposed? Okay,
nobody.
we're back into closed session.
Okay.
All right. So we have a motion before the board for this last variance. What do we want to do with that? Do we want to vote on it? Do we want to modify it?
Well, we've received new information, which said that even if you do try to do this, it's not going to be structurally reasonable to do. That what we're asking to try to pull this porch off to the side has serious structural there is a hardship there. They can't build that.
No, I think what they were saying was
I thought
they're
that's
willing to
exactly
do
what-
an integrated covered front porch except on the west side of the garage.
Oh, that, yeah, yes, I understand. That's what I'm
If
saying. is
their
that-
motion here read
Right,
that they be allowed to follow the ordinance and have the covered front porch on the east side of
East
the
side.
house, but not,
on the west, or on the across the
west.
garage, yes.
that's really what we're
Yes.
talking about.
Do you want
Okay.
to modify your original motion?
I would modify my original motion to say that I would move that we approve a porch on the east side of the garage, but not require it to cross the driveway across the
Okay, I'm not
garage
good at
itself.
This modifying of motion.
Does that make
So
sense?
That's the modified motion. Do we need a?
Does that make
second?
sense?
Yes, it's going to be a motion now to modify what we've done. I would add that we want to make that motion with specific reference to the design that's been put in front of this board.
All right, so
Okay.
Okay, so
We need a so moved in a second.
so moved.
second,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
Did you so move that? What he
I
said?
did, so
Okay.
moved it.
And you
I moved
seconded.
it.
Okay, so now.
I think we all understand.
Vote, is this to modify the motion
This
Or
is a
this- or is this an approval of the modified motion?
so we have, there's a motion to modify what your previous motion was. We're
So-
not approving the modification. We're not approving
Yeah.
the ultimate question. We're approving the
We
modification.
approve the
So
modification.
we do need a vote. It doesn't need to be a roll call.
All right, so basically, all in favor of modifying the motion to not require the integrated front porch on the west side, please say aye.
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 All opposed? Okay, so we've modified the motion.
Now you're in discussion.
Okay, now we're in discussion.
Right.
Now we want to word a motion.
No.
No,
we-
it's
we
the
had a
motion's
motion.
there. So I think the
The
question is,
clarification
does this make sense now? I think is this
On the west, on the east,
on the east
on the east
east
side
side?
of the house, of the
Right.
garage.
East
Right.
and north side of the garage.
East and north side of the
Whatever,
garage, yes.
Okay.
Does that make sense to you, Tom?
Yeah,
Okay.
Okay.
Are we
and we're
ready?
we're not gonna
Please.
require anything on the west side.
Right.
On the
Okay.
west
Are
side.
we ready to, okay, so all in favor of the modified motion for the integrated front porch, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Please poll the board.
John Burse,
Aye.
Mel Wilson,
I,
Randy Sprague.
Aye.
Debbie Saulberg.
Aye.
Tom Walsh, aye.
Okay, so 3 of your 4 requests have been approved. Please see city staff during regular business hours for your next steps. Thank you very much. And sir, I am sorry that this first one took as long. It's too bad we couldn't have
Yeah.
flipped at the beginning of the meeting for you.
We didn't. Well,
Tom, would you please read docket 20?
Try to make it all work.
Into the record. She's got it up on your screen.
Okay, docket 2422, a petition submitted by David Dunlap, Consolidated Construction on behalf of Leonard and Carrie Dino for an application for variance from section 53.078N of the zoning code of the city of Webster Groves. The applicant is requesting a variance of 6.77 feet from the required 10-foot east rear yard setback in order to structurally alter an existing non-conforming one-story detached garage located 3.23 feet from the east rear property line. The property is located at 330 Hazel Avenue within the A4 7,500 square foot residence district.
Thank you. Mr. Bruntrager?
Before we put on testimony, I would ask that exhibits 1 through 8 be included as part of the record for this document.
Thank you.
We would call Mara Perry to testify.
Please go ahead.
Could you please state your name?
Mara Perry.
Are you employed by the city of Webster Groves?
Yes, I am.
In what capacity?
Director of Planning and Development
What are your duties in that position?
to execute and administer zoning regulations.
Through your work with the city, are you familiar with 330 Hazel Avenue?
Yes, I am.
Is that located within city limits?
Yes, it is.
And in which zoning district is it located?
The A4 7,500 square foot residence district.
What is the applicant's request in docket number 2422?
The applicant's requesting a variance of 6.77 feet from the required 10-foot east rear yard setback in order to structurally alter an existing non-conforming one-story detached garage located 3.23 feet from the east rear property line.
Which municipal code sections apply to this request?
Code sections 53.078N. Accessory buildings may be built in a rear yard, but such accessory buildings shall not occupy more than 30% of the rear yard and should not be nearer than 5 feet to any side or rear lot line except, I'm going to go to the very end. On reverse corner lots, the garage shall not be located closer than 10 feet to the rear property line.
Can you describe the existing conditions of the property?
Yes, so this property is a corner property. The property is located at the intersection of Hazel Avenue and Virginia Avenue. It is a reverse corner lot because the front yard setback is in the opposite direction of all the other houses on Virginia. So the other houses on Virginia face Virginia because this is on the corner and the smaller front yard faces Hazel. The rear yard is established opposite to the smaller front yard. So the side, or essentially the rear yard is in the front yard / side yard of the neighboring property. I'm going to actually go back to the aerial photograph for a moment. So you can see all the houses to the right of the property that's in red. All those houses to the right are facing Virginia. And then this is a reverse corner lot because this property faces Hazel. So that puts the backyard, essentially the garage, in the side yard of the neighboring property. You can see here both the house and the garage that are highlighted in yellowish color. They were both built in 1949, and the house is one of the Lustron homes. So when you look at this here, the required rear yard setback on a reverse corner lot is 10 feet to provide an additional buffer from the side yard of the neighboring property. So in this case, this house was built prior to the code, back when the garage regulations were only 3 feet. So this garage was built 3.23 feet from that rear yard setback. So I have a green line where the 10-foot would be. And then as a reminder, there's other code sections that if they did move that garage, it would not meet other sections of the code because it would be less than 10 feet away from the house. And now it wouldn't meet the rear yard setback. So there's a couple different piece parts to this. Here's some photos of the existing garage as it originally sat. They did start doing repairs to the garage that exceeded what we would consider something that could be done without getting a variance. So we explained to them that they needed to come in to get a variance for this to remain. There were some structural alterations in terms of a beam across the above the garage door and some of the corner structural members, as well as just overall. Normally, you can only do things like siding, or replacing the shingles on the roof and some things on the interior. But once you get to this amount of structural alteration, it would require the variance.
Can you explain the variances requested?
Oh, that was it.
Okay. Anything else to add?
No, unless there's questions.
Cluster-on garage, then they wouldn't need to do these structural alterations. Is there anyone who has any questions? So basically, it's an existing garage and they're just trying to make modifications to it. Does anyone have any questions for Mara? Okay, if not, who's here tonight in favor of docket 2422? You sat too long, huh? Made you sit too long.
Life's not easy
I
getting
feel- I
older.
feel
is
that
it?
pain.
Not for sissies.
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you very much. Please state your name and then go ahead.
Dave Dunlap.
And the variant, your request is to structurally alter the garage to make it stand up.
Fix
and
the
last another-
garage.
Last.
You're gonna make it any bigger? It's gonna go on the same footprint, you're gonna.
Anyone have any questions for Mr. Dunlop? Okay. Pretty self-explanatory. You can go ahead and sit down. Is there, or you can stay up there. I don't care.
Whichever place you're
Is
comfortable.
there anyone else who'd like to speak in favor of docket 2422? Is there anyone who'd like to speak in opposition to docket 2422? Are we ready to move to board, close the public session and move to board discussion on this one?
Yes,
So
please.
moved.
Do we have a motion regarding docket 2422?
Make a motion that we approve a variance of 6.77 feet from the required 10-foot east side yard setback to alter
Second.
garage.
Okay, any board discussion on this item?
I think it's been pointed out, this is a corner lot, a reverse corner lot. The garage was built in the easement, which is a peculiar abnormal setback, but was done before there was a code. Applicant only wants to fix the garage. He doesn't want to enlarge it. Corner lot problem. If the house faced Virginia, theoretically, it could have been moved closer to Hazel but it wasn't. And so
Right, and
we
we
just
can't,
have a lot of funny circumstances.
and we
here.
can't really move, and we can't require the garage, they can't tear the garage down and build a new one that meets the setback.
Where?
Because it'd be too close to the house.
Without,
Yeah.
it, yeah,
Yeah,
and
right.
that would require a variance. Are we ready to vote? All in favor of docket 2422, please say aye.
Aye.
All
Aye.
opposed? Your variance says, oh, please poll the board.
John Burse.
Aye.
Mel Wilson,
Aye.
Randy Sprague.
Aye.
Debbie Saulberg.
Aye.
Tom Walls, aye.
Your variance has been approved. Please see city staff during regular business hours for your next steps. Thank you very much.
Okay, so
Um,
move to adjourn or?
do we have any other business
Any
before
other-
the board?
2 seconds.
Other than to wish Mara all the best with her next endeavors. And as Tom was saying earlier, we will really miss working with you, and we hope that, you know, hope to see you around.
Webster.
Yeah. But I'm not going to the groceries. I'm not going to Schnucks quite as early as Mara does.
Ugh. How early?
Oh,
7 a.m. Sunday
Mm,
mornings.
No,
Yeah.
no.
I won't have to do that anymore. People won't be asking me questions.
I'd be surprised. People will still be asking questions.
I hope whoever takes on your task is as good as
You are.
dealing with people and solving problems and trying to get to the kernel of things, helping people before they come to us. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thanks.
you.
Yeah, you do a really good job.
Thank you.
I guess we just wait and see when our next meeting
Our
is,
next
right?
meeting is August 15th.
August
Thursday.
15th, unless unless.
Maybe without Mara, the board will be unable to function.
Well,
We don't know.
The deadline hasn't
hasn't
passed
passed yet.
yet.
All right. If there's no other board business, motion to, I entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in a second?
I'll second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Everybody have a nice Fourth.
Thanks, Mel.
Okay.
We have stuff to
Thanks,
sign.
everyone. Have a good night.